Okay, so today we're looking at changing the wheel bearing on a TRX, a Honda TRX. First thing to do is you get your castle nut off the centre, get your wheel off, get your castle nut off the centre. Obviously you take your split pin out to do that. You've then got a choice. You can either take off your caliper, which is going to be tricky because the bolts are actually exposed here, so they're going to get all wet and they're going to seize. Those ones here, the slide bolts, are easier to get off, but yeah, that's not going to help you because it's still captured by this carrier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off from the bottom. I'm going to take the bottom ball joint off, swing this whole thing away to release the drive shaft, at which point I can then drop the carrier out and get at the bearings. Okay, so you need to split the bottom ball joint because I mean, yeah, you can take this off, but it's not going to help you because you still need to take this joint out. So to split the bottom ball joint, what you need to do is get some force to push it up like that. Now that's not going to get it out, but what you need to do is get some force to put some pressure to split the two, and then what you do is you tap it with a hammer. So what you do is you get the castle nut here, so it's dead in line with the bottom of the thread, so that you've got a lot to hit on, and if you can, a piece of brass drift would be great. And then what you do is while you're holding pressure on that with the bar, you tap it, and it will come. You're better off with one big bang than you are with a lot of little taps, so that you don't end up curling the end of this nut off. But so that's out and that's split. You can then wedge the two away like that, and then you can release this drive shaft so that you can actually then drop out the disc carrier and the disc. To make it easier, I've removed this caliper to show you, but basically to actually release this, what you have to do is to turn the steering fully one way, fully like that. You then need to start to twist this out and away at one angle, so you twist it like that to pull it away, and then you actually have to lift the whole suspension up, so you're lifting the suspension above and up, so actually up like that, so that there's a bit more space to pull that out. I was in fact wrong. You do actually need to get the carrier off because this spline section goes further back in than will allow to be released from here. So a little bit of heat on here. Be careful of the edge here because that's plastic. As you can see, if you're careful, you don't melt that. And there you go, just warm that there. It's aluminium, so it'll conduct quite well. And then with a bit of a slap, you see I got it with a tiny little wrench, so it wasn't that bad. It'll get it. You'll see that these actually do need a bit of heat, because if you notice on the end of those, that's the bolt I just took out of there. They are red tipped there, which means that it's permanent Loctite that's been fitted, so you will need a bit of heat to get these out. There we are. So the carrier's off, like that. This then can be released like that. And then we can get the bearing out. The bearing comes out towards you. So there's a lovely little circlip in here. So get your circlip pliers and get that out. Not easy to do with one hand, but there we are. And then what you've got to do is to get the bearing out this way. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing it. I'm going to try with a drift. If that doesn't work, what I'm going to do is, you see how the bearing has come apart? You see how all the gubbins has come out? It should look, obviously, like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release this outer cage from this cast iron piece by running a seam of MIG weld around in there. Now this is obviously the race that I'm going to throw away because I'm changing the whole bearing. But what that's going to do is it's going to, when the weld metal cools, it contracts and it will pull the bearing together, loosening it away from the outer edge. So you just run it round, you don't need to go too far, you can run it round, and that contraction of that metal will pull the race together and let it slip out. But I'm going to try and drift it out first from the back. Okay, to give myself a bit more space, I'm taking this shroud off to be able to then get into the back and push this bearing out forwards. Okay, noticed a mistake. This bearing does actually come out easily, but if you look, you see that terrible. Do you see how there's like a sleeve, the inner, there's like a shoulder here. Try and get a good angle on it. It'll be better, you'll get a better angle when I've taken it out and you can see it. There's actually a shoulder there. Will that focus? Look, see how the bearing's moved in there, but the shoulder is still here. So don't tap on the shoulder, tap on the bearing itself and it slides out really quite easily. Here you go, now you can see the shoulder. See it in there, where the shoulder sits? So don't hit that with your punch or your drift. You hit the bearing. It's not really even pressed in, it's just an easy push fit in. So there we are, we'll tap the new one in. To save damage to the new bearing as you put it in, get the old bearing so it faces up against that one and tap the old bearing, not the new bearing. That bearing's in and seated home. Now what you need to do is make sure you've cleaned the little O-ring slot, the little circlip slot, because if you haven't, it won't sit back properly and it may jump out on you. Get your circlip into place and then just check by just edging it to make sure that it's seated nicely. And then it's also worth just giving it a little tap all round to make sure it's sat down in place, because the last thing you want is that coming out, because then the whole thing will move this way. You've then got to put your seals in. The fat one, there's a fat one and a thin one. The thin one goes on the front, the fat one goes at the back. Again, your bearing is going to be useful to get those into place. So look, you can kind of squeeze the lip into the damaged bits of the old bearing so that you've got something to ride on to tap it in. Alternatively, you use a big socket just to catch on the rim here and not to catch on that, because you don't want to be smashing that up. Don't forget, in your packet there is a little one of those, and that's to stop crud going into the spline. Sorry, stop crud going into the splines in there. So that we'll pick out in a minute, and I'll show you that. So yeah, okay. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to put the seal on the back, seal on the front. I'm then going to put the back through. Yeah, the drive shaft back through, and I'm going to start bolting it back together, and I'll show you as we go. The back seal is now in. Now look, you see how this seals? It's a double lip seal, so it seals. Hang on, I'll show you on the other one. Where's the other one gone? Right, so it seals in two places. It seals there and it seals in there. So it's a double lip seal. And look where it rides on here. See, it rides on there and it rides on there. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that's smooth. So what we're going to have to do is get a wire brush and get this nice and smooth so that it doesn't destroy the seal that we're putting back in. So we'll get that done next. Okay, so that's cleaned up and put back in. Now again, remember, you're turning the end of this drive shaft that way, and you're lifting the whole section of this to give you enough clearance, lifting it right up against the shock absorber to give you enough clearance to get this to fit in. So turn it at an angle so the drive shaft comes like this and then kicks this way, like that. Dogleg it. Get it sort of pointing in the right direction, sort of up against here, and doglegging in that way. Lift this up, bear in mind, be careful you don't lose your jack stand on the way, and get it up and in. Okay, so we're ready to put the hub carrier back on, but if you notice, the bearing on the old one has come apart. Look, the inner race of that's gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to drift that off. So what we can do is we can get a drift in there. Find my drift. Somewhere. There we are. It's not the drift I'm going to use, but we're going to get a drift in there and actually knock that off. It won't be press fit, and if it is, what we'll do is we'll put some heat, or we'll cut it. But we're going to try and tap that off with the drift and clean that up as well, because obviously this one also seals against the rest. So it seals against another lip seal. Like I thought, that's not difficult to get off with a hammer and a bolster through the back there. It just taps off and we can replace it. So that's off and cleaned up. So just tapped it out of the way. We've cleaned this up and tapped the new bearing into here, the new seal into here. This then goes back in like so, and we'll tighten that up, and it's all going back together lovely. as all of these sit on a shoulder, so basically this shoulder mates up against the back of the bearing, so the shoulder on this mates to that side. Actually no, well, it would be whatever is on this side. That mates to the back of that, which is then connected through to the other side of the bearing, and the bearing sits then on the shoulder. When you're doing this up, you'll actually feel it bottom out, so you do it up to torque the two together because they're quite tight, so you're squeezing it in together and you'll actually feel it when it hits the bottom. You don't need to go too much tighter than that, and then just put your split pin through. Okay, we're now looking at putting this back on, the bottom ball joint. Now what we'll do is we'll get it up as tight as we can by fingers, and then what they tend to do is these tend to slip. So the trick is to get it up as tight as you can loose, and then what you do is you tap that up to make the taper joint in there grab onto the shaft. So what you're doing is you're making it grab and grab the shaft, and then you get a bit more of a turn on it with your spanner, and then you're tapping it again to make it grab a bit more and then do it up. So do it like that so that you're actually using that taper that caused you a problem in getting it open for your own good effect rather than against it. There we are, one swift tap and it can be done up straight away. It grips really nicely, just the same as you found it did when you tried to undo the bloody thing to start with. So yeah, that works quite well. These are castle nuts, so they've got many positions on them. You know, so don't worry about, you know, whether you've got it right or not. Look, I mean, that one could go through there or it could go through that one. It lines up with that one perfectly, so don't worry. They're easy enough to do. So what we've got to do now is we're going to put on, so it's the reverse of the way it went on. So piece of plastic back on, that one, like that, which is a protector of some sort. Then we've got to put the hub carrier back on. Then we've got to put the caliper back on. And then some split pins, and then we're about done. Just a quick one while you're putting it back together. You see here, this is where the brake pads sit. If ever you have trouble with your brake pads seizing and being stiff to slide, so the front brakes slide, what can happen, you see how these sit in here as anti-squeals? What happens is underneath them, this aluminium, just what it does is the water stays in behind that and it corrodes it slightly, and what it does is it just lifts these up and jams the pads. But it's not serious, and you can just catch it by a little bit of a scratch and it's back where it should be. Okay, so that's back in. Right, just a quick one. However hard you try, you're going to get grease and oil on the disc. There's a couple of things you can do to stop that, you know, to deal with that. You can spray brake cleaner on it to get rid of that, but then you're probably not going to get the back. You can use petrol and wipe it off with a rag, things like that. But really what I'd say to you is, look, take the advantage while you're down here to get the little nipple off and give the brakes a little bit of a bleed. So you're going to need two people really. You can do it with one, but it's kind of hard. So what you do is it's an 8mm I think underneath here, but what you do is you get your little nipple off, can't do it with one hand, get your little nipple off here. Then what you do is you go up to the top of the bike and you take off those two screws. Now bear in mind they're not PZ, they're normal Phillips, so don't strip them. So undo those two. Try and make sure that this is standing upright, because it's going to be very full in there. You see how it's not really straight, so you'll need to sort of turn that way. Get those two off, take it off, the brake fluid's in there, and then bleed it through. And to do that, all you do is you have someone up there squeeze the handle, and then you unnip that and let the fluid squirt out. Just unnip it a bit until the fluid comes out, and then nip it closed again. Do that a couple of times. You can watch for bubbles if you want, but really if you just did that 3 or 4 pumps, you probably find it spot on. And then top up the fluid at the top. So there we are, good as new, no movement whatsoever, spins lovely. There we are guys, I hope that helps. I don't know whether the other bikes are the same as this, the other TRXs. This is a 500. I would assume they're pretty similar. I have no reason to doubt that they'd be that they'd be all that different. So it's not difficult. I mean, I haven't used any specialist tools really, apart from, unless you count, you know, your circlip pliers as specialist tools. Other than that, I've used my standard socket set, which has taken such a beating, it's not even true. And it's all gone back in. There's no, you know, These things are pretty much designed to be worked on, Honda especially. Personally, I wouldn't go near a Kawasaki if my life depended on it, but horrific. But these Hondas seem to be quite easy to work on. There we are, guys. Cheers for now.